I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Could everybody make sure that your phones are either turned off or on silent, please? I'm gonna check this first. So, for public forum, I have 3 people that wrote yes that they were speaking today. I'm assuming that's for the presentation. Just for you? Is that also for you?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I saw Ethan Hampton vote yes too, so I was assuming you'd vote yes.
Oh yeah, he wrote YE, so I guess you, but I assume that it's part of the presentation unless you guys just want to get up and talk.
No.
Okay. All right, so we're gonna move right on.
Great. So I'm going to have Mr. Carter, our assistant principal, introduce our first presentation.
So we've got today for the board our wonderful Science Olympiad team, our amazing coaches to show to you guys all the great stuff they did.
I was told to keep it brief, so I promise it's 35 minutes, right? Good evening, President Madigan, Board of Education, Mr. Van Orman, Administration, those in attendance in person or watching from home this evening. On Saturday, January 27th, 12 Red Creek High School students traveled to Des Moines College for regional competition in the Mid-State region for Science Olympiad. This year, students were eager to recapture a position they barely lost out on last year team-wise that would have qualified them for the New York State Finals in March of 2023. Earlier this year, the school year, coaches were informed that the Midwestern region that encompasses the Rochester school area was not having a regional. A geographical split was decided on Route 390 that runs north and south. And those teams that were east of 390 were told to travel to Des Moines for competition. This enabled 17 more teams to come out to Des Moines to compete for the same top 10 finishes in each event, and also compete for a limited number of teams to earn a state bid to the New York State Finals. Within those 17 teams, there were 3 teams that qualified for states last year. With that challenge being communicated often and early to our students, they sprang into action and doubled down on preparing and perfecting their events. When the day was done, Red Creek was able to snag 10 top 10 spots out of 22 events that day, and respectfully, 3 of those events were 11th place. Team-wise, Red Creek was able to capture 5th overall out of 51 teams. That coveted bid to the New York State Finals was back in our hands, and we traveled to Des Moines in March. A few items stood out to me that day that I think we need to mention here this evening that exemplifies the type of students we have here at Red Creek. We had a student with an illness that could not compete that day, and we had a number of students volunteer and agree to fill in those in the events that that student had. Every position, every bit of support that all the students gave each other that day is a large reason we are moving on to the next level. During one of the events, a Red Creek team noticed that there was a critical error on a paper pencil exam, which gave all participants an advantage in that block of time. It was reported to our coaches, who then filed an appeal, and the event was nullified and not scored. Even though it was a potential advantage for our team on their test, our Red Creek students felt it was not fair for all. Our student character and respect for the integrity of the rules in that moment is one that I will always be proud of. In this brief presentation that you can see, I want to highlight for you a few things. This slide here, I know it's a lot of information and a lot of data, but when you have 51 teams competing, it's hard to put it all in one canvas. But you can see, if I can kind of move the cursor, there's Red Creek right there. This is the BETS data that's used to classify sports programs across all New York State, grades 10 through 12, class AA, AAA, whatever it is, all the way down to class D. You notice that Red Creek is in the sixth position. Fayetteville Manlius took first and fifth, but only one FM team can move on to the state tournament. So Red Creek slides up one. So we were one of 8 teams that day to qualify for states. I'll let that sink in just for a second. You can see how the bars kind of align themselves. And you can see there are districts with 10 times, almost, and we're ahead of them. The next slide here shows you the top 10 finishes versus school and team. Red Creek, if you can see it, I'll put the cursor there, finishes right there, very tight spot. But remember, those are the same top 10 medals that 17 additional teams were going after that day. Red Creek was able to compete very well with some of the best and largest schools of that day. Again, noting that Red Creek has 3 events that got 11th place, and we walked away with 3 first place finishes in 22 events. Our next slides here take a look at some of those, well, that's all of those. Teams that finished in the top 10, we'd like to just kind of have them on the screen there so you can see, just kind of go through some action shots as well as the medal shots that are there. What's the sea lion? What was that name? Chadwick, yeah, we have a team mascot, Chadwick. It's our sea lamprey who kind of appears there. He became just a coveted member of our team there. Well, there's a story behind it. You can see as you go through these events, they're not just building events. They're not just one subject area events. They are spanning across the fields of STEM. Red Creek was able to compete with the best in recognition for their hard work and effort as I keep on going through this. You can see that, a great number of the students that day received recognition for their top 10 efforts. This is a PDF file. That last on the right-hand side there was a short video, but I can share that with anybody who needs it if they'd like to see it. But we're proudly displaying that our students can compete with the best at any given moment. So to kind of close out a little bit, Red Creek Science Olympiad is part of our school culture. As news spread of the achievements that day, I heard from former coaches, former science Olympians, who understood what it takes to sustain a program that sparks careers in STEM. Our community is proud, and your support is greatly appreciated. I want to thank everyone involved in this process as we move on to the interstate finals. Thank you to the parents for your ongoing support, to the teachers and staff for your words of encouragement, to the students behind me who set a goal. The goal was achieved. Thought we have a bit more to go after right now. We also have 7 seniors this year. In case we don't know or don't understand, that's the maximum number of seniors you can have on a team. I cannot bring a team of 15 seniors. I'd love to, but we can't do that. I want to thank them separately for their hard work and their dedication to a program that they were introduced to on their first day of 8th grade. We stopped by as a class to the display case, as I do with my advanced biology students, and I showed them the medals and the trophies of the past. I challenged them to add to the case. They did. It's a great group. They make our jobs very worthwhile, and I'm very blessed with the opportunity to be with them on this journey. I will step aside, and some of the students will come up and they'll talk to you about some of the events that they do, maybe what Science Olympiad means to them. So, doesn't matter what's first. Doesn't matter. Just choose.
Sure you want to go first? So, I participated in anatomy and physio. Oh, I'm Patrick Boyle. I participated in, I did the anatomy and physiology, physics detectives, micromention, and ecology events. I placed in first in 3 of them and 6th in ecology. I just really like the availability of Science Olympiad at Red Creek because it just allows for the opportunity just to show off some science skills to other schools.
Oh, you want to step up? All right, I'm Ethan Hankford. I have to thank all of you also for your help in showing up, especially the administration that helped showed up at the event and showed support, and I have to thank the coaches for everything they've done for me in all these years that allow me to, do something like I love sports, but then on the off season for me, I can go do this, which really allows me to show everything that I can do. It's a great way to, sort of end my year. Everybody said yes. So.
No.
So, anybody want to speak or? Noel was sick that day, but Noel, that's I think the other thing that came out of that was Noel gets another shot.
Yes.
So we're very happy about that. Noel's very happy about that. And we do have Graciana who's here. She's a freshman. We brought her last year to kind of see what things were like. I think she liked what she saw. She's with us here tonight. She did a fantastic job in astronomy for us, probably our best finish in years. So looking forward to her growth in that position. We also brought an 8th grader, Connor DeVinny. He's in the picture there behind you. I usually select 1 or 2 8th graders to come with us because that's our future. You have to keep things sustainable. So we currently don't have a B division team, but that does require a lot of work and a lot of coaches, just like any Science Olympiad team does. But so the future's there. We keep on seeding what's going on so that we can have moments like this in the Board of Education meeting. So again, thank you to all of you. Any questions that you have?
I just have one quick question. The chart that you had,
Yeah.
is it because all of you had 10, which is why there's 8 moving on? Is that what you said? Because it was a tie, you all get to go?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know what the magic number is, but for how many teams compete that
Okay.
day, so many teams can qualify for states. There's some metric, some
Okay.
algorithm that I don't know. I don't want to know. All I know is that I'll say this: even without the 17 teams, we still would have made it.
I have no doubt.
Yeah.
So.
I based on the data I've looked at, we would have made it.
Okay.
I have more of a comment rather than a question. I just want to say how proud I am of this program. I mean, this program, as long as I've been a part of this district, which I'm an alum of this district, Science Olympiad has done very well. And as Ethan mentioned, being able to round out his experience as a student from athletics to this academic side of it, I am so proud of our district that we have all those sides. And River doesn't want to speak up, but we've got Ethan who has made done very well in soccer, and we've got River who just went to states for girls and women's wrestling. I mean, this is just such a well-rounded group of students and a well-rounded program that we have at Red Creek, and I'm just incredibly proud to be a part of it. So thank you all for the hard work you put into it, and thank you, Mr. Bonanno, as well.
Also, just a comment, I also hold the program super dear to me. I see 2 of my old coaches back here right now, and there are still moments. My teammate and I won first place in electrical something. I don't remember the title of it, but my husband's circuitry. My husband's an electrician, so there's still days where I'll be like, "You don't know who you're talking to. I was first place in the States." So I totally understand what. I don't usually understand what he's talking about, but don't tell him that. So I'm super proud of you guys. I understand how much time and energy and commitment it takes, and it sounds like you guys all crushed it. And same for the coaches. I know how many hours you guys spend working on this with the students. So thank you guys. I'm really proud of you, and I hope you guys do well in your next step. I know you guys will do well.
Anybody have any other questions? No. All right, well, it's a ditto from the rest of us, so good luck in the next step. We love this stuff, so when you win, come back and tell us about it, okay? Congratulations. we set up for the next presentation, this is your easy ticket out if you're not looking to stay.
Yeah.
They're staying for economics.
Oh, all right. Or if they're a board member's child and she's like, oh.
Great, we'll make the easy transition from a student recognition program into kind of the next phase of our budget presentations from our business office. Again, it's this layering process, adding components each board meeting as we continue to refine our information and put all these pieces together. So I'll have Danielle kind of take you through the capital component specifically in this meeting.
Well, thank you for having me here again tonight. Just to stick with our format that we've kind of been running with, this is an updated copy of our timeline. We're moving along right along schedule. Things are going to start to firm up budget-wise in March. Hopefully we're going to receive those updated numbers from the state from the legislative budget prior to when we adopt our budget. But just so you can keep those dates in mind, that's kind of where we're moving. So what's included in the capital component? We've got our operations and maintenance department. We have our debt service, which is our bonds that are left over from previous capital projects that we've done, things like that. We do typically do what's called a capital outlay once every year. That is a one-time project not to exceed $100,000 that we can do and submit for aid for. So not that full $32 million project we went to the voters for, but something we can do small each year to keep up with some of that stuff. Something new in here is any lease expenses. For us, those are very minor. But if we were to engage in any other future leases, you would see them in here, as well as some equipment purchases. So in particular, we're evaluating right now bringing the snow plowing in-house in light of our smaller, lighter, knock on wood, winter seasons. And that would require the purchase of a loader to be able to accommodate that. So that's what's kind of included in the numbers you're about to see. This is a much smaller component than one we've gone over previously. So you can see operations and maintenance, generally in line. We have that increase in the maintenance code. That's primarily the purchase of that loader that I just talked about. We have some debt service. Those are going to be our bonds. You'll see that they're dropping for next year. That's not for any reason that anything's changed. That's just the debt schedule that's set in the bonds. For our 23 capital project, our fiscal advisors are not projecting that we're going to take out any new debt for that in 24-25. So this is just the debt that had been existing previously. We have small amounts of other items that follow into here. We have that transfer for the capital outlay, as well as a separate transfer in our external audit. It was noted that there was something that needed to be done to fully close out that 2016 project that we had done. So you'll see this $239,000 transfer out. On the revenue side, there's a $239,000 transfer in, so it kind of washes itself out. So we have limitations on what we can do with certain pools of money, and this kind of helps make that flow through and happen, and we've worked with our auditors to make sure that we're doing this properly, we can get it cleaned up, get us back on moving along. And then of course we have the proportionate share of the employee benefits. Overall in this section there is an increase. Again, $200,000 of that is going to be that one-time transfer to clean us up, and as well that one-time equipment purchase. So we talked a little bit, one component each meeting basically. Here's an overview of where we're at with all three of those together. So in the pie chart, you can see the split between those three components. The admin is the blue portion at 9%, program is our 72% orange portion, and then the capital is going to be that smaller bit. So in this pie chart, that division between the components is consistent with where we've landed in previous budgets. Our program is always the biggest portion of what we spend money on, and that includes all those instructional pieces that we know very well. Also included in this
is going to be the ARP activities and positions that we talked about previously. So those instructional coaches, some of the MTSS activities that we've been doing, that replacement of equipment. Every year we're gonna account for the increased cost of goods and services, and as well that capital outlay transfer. So just to give you an overview of where we're at, consistent year to year as far as what we're spending money on. For our revenues, we talked about these in the very beginning of this budget development process. That $18.3 million, that's our estimated state aid. This proportionate share of the pie chart has gone up slightly from last year. The levy is the blue portion, the tax levy at 4.9 million, 20%, that's pretty consistent. Keep in mind that as we're talking about this budget development process, right now we're establishing a floor. So these revenues don't include an increase to the tax levy, and they don't include the use of fund balance and reserves right now. And that is why, so if you look at this compared to 23-24, our current year, you'll see that the overall estimated revenue is slightly lower. And that's really for two reasons. One, our state aid projections, we've projected, and for the past about 6 years, we've actually collected about $1.5 million less than what we projected. So there's some adjusting to right-size those revenue projections to make sure that what we're saying we're going to collect, we actually collect, and we can work on that information throughout the year.
Danielle, is that 1.5 million a year or in that 6-year span?
Per year.
Okay.
So that's why you don't see necessarily, I know we talked last time about the governor's numbers projecting a 3.63% increase in state aid. That's partially why you're not seeing that gray area raised by 3.63%, because those governor's projections are much higher than what we're actually seeing in the year.
Okay.
The other bit in here is that these projections don't use fund balance or reserves. So we had talked last time about, for the past few years, we've been closing a gap. We've been saying our revenues, they're less than our budget. We're gonna use some of our rainy day funds so that we can do all of these things we wanna do. So just keep in mind, when you're not seeing that increase, it's because of those factors. So where do we stand? New York State says we need to have a balanced budget. Our revenues must equal our expenditures when we go out to vote. Right now, our revenues are 24 million just about, and our expenditures are 25.4. So we've got a gap. We want those scales to be in balance, and I want to talk with you about what we can do to bring those in balance. So here, keep in mind the 23-24, the current school year, we started this year out with a gap of $1.2 million. Right now, the difference between those scales is about $1.2 million. And that is good news. The first step to right-sizing our budget is making sure that that gap doesn't grow. So although it is a large number, and we certainly want to address it and do something about it, just keep in mind the first step is keeping it level, and we're there right now. There's really 3 things that we can do to look at this gap and figure out what we're going to do about it as a district. The first option is to increase the tax levy. So that's the source of revenue we have some control over. We can say we're going to raise taxes. Our state aid is given to us. It's based on a number of factors, but there's really not too much we can do beyond collective. If we were to increase the tax levy, each percentage increase in our area represents about $50,000. So when we're talking about a gap of 1.2 million, we're probably not going to be able to get to that with just the tax levy. So option 2 is we want to, look at potentially reducing our spending. And sometimes that doesn't mean necessarily cuts. It means looking at our needs, making sure we're using our money efficiently, making sure that we're maximizing what we have. But in the long term, it may also mean reviewing how we operate as a district and areas where we may have some leverage. So we've talked a little bit about that as well with the ARP funding. Expiring, those funds moving into the general fund for expenditures, doing those needs assessments we talked about with our BOCES expenditures, with our program expenditures. That's all part of the process for option 2. Looking at what we're doing and why, and asking ourselves, can we do it better? Option 3 is continuing to use our reserves. We can move forward and say, listen, I know we have a gap of 1.2 million. We're gonna use our rainy day savings. Eventually, and we're kind of at that tipping point right now, what happens is we use more savings than we can replenish at the end of the year. And then we start getting into that long-term fiscal stress and trouble as a district. Realistically, I would say a long-term solution to that gap, because of its size, probably involves all three of these options. We want to make sure that we're being efficient with what we're using our funds on. We want to make sure we're maximizing the impact on the students. Increasing the tax levy is not going to fix this problem alone, but we do want to make sure that we're doing what we can to keep up with those rising expenditures on our side. I would say, if we tackle this problem in 3 years, if we were to use, instead of $1.2 million in fund balance, if we came back and said, listen, we're just about in the $750,000 range. Let's try and chunk it, see if we can do this as gently as possible, make sure that we're keeping in the front of our minds what is best for students and what is best for the students 15 years from now as well as tomorrow. Because we want to be able to continue offering all the great programs we have. We want to continue providing a great educational experience, and doing this long-term fiscal planning can help support those efforts. So what may change in these numbers? What are we still waiting on? We have not yet received our insurance rate for next year. I marked it as an increased confirmation because our insurance rates very rarely go down. They typically go up by some percentage. We're still finishing up some of our needs assessments throughout this process, so we may be able to say, you know what, we've looked at it, we can maximize this, maybe these two softwares do the same thing, all those sorts of evaluations to see where we can maximize those dollars. And the last bit, of course, is that the legislative budget has not yet been released. So, if the legislative budget comes out and they are providing us more state aid than the governor projected, that immediately helps ease some of the strain of that $1.2 million gap. My word of caution is that those may not come out in time. Last year, the legislative budget was late, and in that situation where we don't have those numbers, we still have to go to vote and finalize. I would recommend using the estimates we have generated based on the governor's numbers. If the legislative budget comes in higher than that, that's good news for us, but I would recommend erring on the side of caution, making sure that we're setting ourselves up for success at the end of that fiscal year. And then up next. So March 6th, our next meeting, doing an update in all components, what's changed, where are we at, how are things looking. And then March 20th, we have slated a budget workshop. So to be able to talk through what are our priorities as a district, what changes are we talking about, what do we want to make, how are we going to look at this problem and end up on the other side of it. And of course, throughout that, this whole process is collaboration between the buildings, between the administration, between you as the board and the community members and us. You know, we're all kind of working together to put this best plan forward. You know, and ultimately, there are still some things up in the air. There will always be some things up in the air. What we're doing is using all the information we have to make sure that the estimates we're starting next year with more accurately reflect where we're going to end next year. So doing just some of that right sizing we've been talking about for the past couple meetings. Yeah. Is everything I have for you? If there are questions.
I have a couple of, excuse me, small questions, I think. Do you know the number of positions or about what the cost is associated with the ARP positions that are included in the general fund?
Yeah, so the number of positions, I believe we have 3 instructional coach positions right now that are funded through those ARP funds. We're talking about roughly coming into the budget, I believe it's about $125,000, talking just salaries alone, right? Salaries and the mandatory fringes.
For the 3 instructional coaches?
Mm-hmm. And then we've got $90,000 in BOE services that are coming in. There are some other costs for those MTSS stipends, some of those other smaller, well, not smaller, but some of those other smaller dollar value support systems we have in place. But if you wanted a full accounting of that, I'd really have to go back and look at all those
That's right. I was
numbers.
just wondering, like ballpark, about
Yeah,
how much.
ballpark figures,
we
we're
were
just
keeping.
out there. You know, and I think as we talk about the priorities as a district, looking at what is serving our students, what is serving our staff, you know, certainly if we can get the same or better services in other areas, those savings can help minimize the impact of those ARP funds flowing in.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question, Jolene, or
Go
I didn't know if you
ahead.
had one more. Is our next meeting where we might see some of those priority breakdowns on, you know, what potentially needs to be changed or what needs to stay, or is that a
Yes.
March 6th conversation?
Yes, so
Okay.
in March, I would recommend that we start those conversations. You know, certainly we can make recommendations on what we've looked at for what would best serve us moving forward, how do we kind of slice this problem up to get to where we want to be. And then that March 20th budget workshop, that's a much more, you know, whereas this is more of a presentation, that workshop is more of a conversation.
Okay.
So we can kind of work through, you know, where do we stand as a group on some of those issues.
I think there might be a question in the back.
Yeah,
If you-
hello.
So how would reducing the spending, like the budget and all,
Mhm.
affect the students? What would be cut, what would be altered, what would be like changed?
So that's a great question, and that's kind of what we're looking at right now. So before we make a decision on anything that would be cut or changed, we want to collaborate as a group and see, you know, how are we going to best serve you as the students and make sure that you're still getting that great educational experience.
Okay, well, couldn't you do a student poll on what, like, say, extracurriculars that are funded by the school are like considered least popular and or nobody goes to them? And then so, like, not say get rid of them entirely, but cut a small chunk of the budget from them. Or say take a small chunk of the money from, say, like our sports.
So could we do that? Yes. What I would say is that instead of cutting something, the first place I would look is where we can be more efficient. How we can get the same, you know, whether it's a software service that we're buying, whether it's a BOE service that we're buying, that we get more bang for our buck before we start looking at necessarily cutting anything within the district.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have kind of a two-part question. So when we're talking about the gap,
Yep.
and so it sounds like we have like our projections, but then we tend to have, so we're pulling from our rainy day fund that you call it, but then at the end of the year, we're having money that we can put back into the rainy day fund. So does this gap reflect that difference of what we're actually pulling out of our rainy day fund, or what
So-
is that number, I guess, is what I'm looking for. At the end of the day, where are we at with that fund?
Sure, so you're talking about the net impact, right,
Mhm.
of what's being removed from those rainy day
Correct.
funds. So, in 22-23, we ended the school year with, about $700,000.
Okay.
Though that surplus at the end of the year is typically fairly consistent,
Okay.
yes.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Say it. However.
Okay.
However.
It is typically fairly consistent. Sometimes there are one-time expenditures that are either accounted for in a separate cycle that may change that number. But overall, we would expect that to be fairly consistent. I can say that I've done some preliminary projections that would put us closer towards that $400,000 range than the $700,000. So that means, right, in 23-24, if we're looking at that for this school year, we took 1.2. If I'm looking at it and I'm saying, I think we're gonna land at about 400,000 at the end of the year, that means we're losing that 800,000.
Okay. So that, my next question is, what would you feel from a financial standpoint would be an acceptable gap? Like, should it be, obviously it should be zero, but what would you feel comfortable with the district being at?
Sure, so I think when we look at this as a long-term solution, if we chunk it out in 3 years, if we can get in 24-25 between $700,000 and $750,000 use of fund balance, you know, with that reduction in spending that we're planning on doing during the year, what I'd like to do is make sure that by 24-25, we've maybe taken 750,000, but we're gonna end the year with that. And then
Okay.
we're gonna get that rainy day fund to be at least net neutral. And then in the next budget seasons, continue that work to say realistically, we would love to be in a position where we're appropriating $0 and we have a truly balanced budget between our revenues and our expenditures.
Okay.
I was gonna ask a similar question as far as the gap. Is 1.2 million on the higher end, even going back a couple of years, like what was the gap?
To give you an exact number, I'd have to check. I would say it has increased over the years, the appropriation of fund balance and reserves for the district. I would also say that for a district of our size, $1.2 million is fairly substantial. We're not a $100 million district. That proportionate value of the $1.2 million puts a more pressure on us to address it, because it really is a larger portion of our overall budget.
Do the numbers, you had mentioned under the what may change, the insurance rate. Do your projections of expenditures include any estimated increase?
Yes, so
Okay.
I started out with about, as I've heard, between a 15 and 19% increase is where I started. I am expecting that shortly we will receive that confirmation of what that increase is. Something to keep in mind is that the Wayne Finger Lakes Consortium, they put those increases by plan. So one plan may go up 6%, one plan may go up 12%. So to do that real and true calculation, once
Okay.
those rates are finalized, I can say, well, the average increase might be 12%, but because we have people in the plan that has the lower increase, maybe it's less for us.
So we're talking health insurance,
Correct. Yep.
not property casualty.
Sorry. Sorry. When should I take off?
Thank you.
Okay. And do you know where Red Creek would land if the governor's proposal doesn't go through?
So these projections are based on those numbers. So if the governor's proposal, everything stays status quo, that 1.2 would be our gap. One thing I will say is I'm projecting revenues that are lower than what the governor's proposal has, because those expense-based aids, where what we spend comes back to us in aid, have typically been overestimated in the governor's proposal, and that's how we ended up collecting that $1.5 million less.
Right, you reduced your transportation and your BOCES aid.
Right.
So, how much is your loader that you're planning on purchasing?
So we're in the process of gathering quotes right now. We're looking at a used one. It would be between $70,000 and $80,000.
So any thought of renting that?
So we haven't explored renting. I have looked at a lease to own. So we talked about the leases would be included in this capital component. That would bring the cost year to year down substantially for us.
All right, so for your capital audit recommendation due to previous administration overspending their revenue, their budget, for not having the revenues, for those watching at home. Any thoughts of having that right-sized this year? And I understand that the auditor said, go ahead and take care of that this year, or for next year, but that could take place this year, per authorization of the board. What would that do to your tax cap?
I would have to run the numbers on it. So we're taking the $239,000 in revenue is coming from our debt service fund.
It's a wash.
Yes, yeah. So and then it's gonna go right into capital. I would have to run it to see what that would do. I would say that tentatively, based on what I've been looking at, given that I'm not really projecting having that much surplus at the end of the year, if we plan for it in 24-25 instead, it might be a little more gentle for us.
But that 239 is coming 100% out of debt service though, so
Correct.
it's a wash.
Right. I just mean as far as replacing our reserves at the end of the year, getting us on that track. If we plan for it next year, it's a little easier to say, moving forward, we can accommodate that one-time change rather than necessarily this year. Coming into a budget that I didn't create, I wanna make sure that we end, on a good note in 23-24. And I wanna be able to plan for that currently in this year.
But it would be a board authorization to increase the budget $239,000 and also offset it with debt service $239,000.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I have not given that thought. I'm sorry,
Oh, okay.
I wasn't picking up what you're
Yeah,
saying.
that's all, that's with board
Yes.
authorization.
So, I haven't given that thought. If that's something that the board wants,
So then
to
it's
do.
all taken care of.
Mhm.
Next year, new cheer.
Right, we can take that, that'll come right out, but it will come right out on both sides, right? So we're still
Mhm.
probably gonna have our $1.2 million gap. If that's something that the board would like to do, certainly that's at your discretion. I've been kind of working based on what the auditors recommended at the end of their review.
Just a thought.
You know that all the students in the back just wrote down New Year, New Cheer, so they can go back and tell Mr. Clement that they were paying attention.
That they were
yesterday.
here.
Yeah. Is that something that needs to be decided right now, or can
No.
it wait until?
No.
Okay.
It's a May, June, by May.
Conversation?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Danielle, did you do any preliminary?
Tax cap projections,
Yeah.
yes, I did. So right now, we are looking at approximately 3.8% for our cap. And for folks at home, the tax cap is frequently referred to as a 2%. There's a lot of exclusions that go into that, so 3.8%, if that's our cap, that would still only require a simple majority vote, not exceeding it and needing 60% voters.
Still generating less than 200,000 for the community.
Correct.
And increased revenue.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Correct. Yep, and that's why I think that this gap, realistically, we would need to explore multiple methods of addressing it because we unfortunately don't have as much industry in our district, which means that those increases affect homeowners proportionally more than in districts who have a lot of that industry sort of bearing the brunt of that levy. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, before we move on, Mr. Norman, did you want to make an introduction?
Certainly. So in the back with us this evening, I just wanted to make the board aware of one of our new employees. Lauren is our PR specialist, public relations specialist through BOCES. She's been with us, we'll say, just over a month, 6 weeks. And, we're pleased to have her. She's been getting herself acclimated, meeting with, she's met with me several times, met with our administrative team. Is working with some of the administrators. I think you've seen an increase in our social media presence and information on our website as a result of having, more boots on the ground approach at this point. So we're, Lauren, it's a tough task coming in the middle of the year and kind of getting up to speed, but, we're pleased to have her here. I wanted to at least allow the board to see a name, or hear a name and see a face at the same time. So, welcome, Lauren.
Welcome,
We're
Lauren.
super excited that you're here.
Okay, we're gonna move on. C1, the regular minutes from the January 24th meeting. Could I have a motion, please? Mrs. Folds in a second. Mrs. Kaiser. Any questions, corrections? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, moving on. I would take D1 and 2 for the treasurer's report and the warrants. Mrs. Bliss, Mrs. Allen. Any questions on these two?
The only question I have is, I had brought it up with previous administration, so neither one of you would probably have any idea that I had. But I didn't know if the district was looking into investing our money in someplace different, maybe like that class. Because I know that's making some big bucks right now, and we are not.
Yeah, Danielle and I've talked, Danielle, yeah, we've talked to look into that, absolutely.
Thank you, Mrs. Bliss. Big bucks, we are not.
We are not.
We're full of like good little cliches.
Maybe we should make that a thing on the government and academics thing, like when they go back tomorrow, they have to tell what.
Yeah, you guys have
You
to
guys have to like listen for.
Pick a board member and think of a funny comment.
Word search.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that would be so fun.
All right, that being said, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we'll move on. I take a motion for the full consent agenda. Mrs. Dingman, and a second by Mrs. Kaiser. Any questions on this group? Okay, when you're ready.
Mrs. Decker?
Yes.
Mrs. Bliss?
Yes.
Mrs. Dingman?
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser?
Yes.
Mrs. Allen?
Yes.
Mrs. Folds? And Mrs. Madigan?
Yes. Thank you. Moving on to F, new business.
I'll make a
Mrs.
motion at F1 through 6.
Okay, thank you. A second by Mrs. Bliss. Questions on this group? When you're ready.
Okay, Mrs. Folds?
Yes.
Mrs. Allen?
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser?
Yes.
Mrs. Dingman?
Yes.
Mrs. Bliss?
Yes.
Mrs. Decker?
Yes.
And Mrs. Madigan?
Yes, thank you. Closing. Okay, any questions on the administrative reports? Okay. Mr. Van Orman?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I shared out with the board kind of a mid-year update, as it was something that was in our presentation plan with the board. So just kind of a mid-year status check on our strategic plan. I don't want to go deep into this, but again, of course, kind of the first parts are the overview of that strategic plan that we have alluded to it several times, certainly back in the fall. Some of those goals, those 3 goals, which of course you should be seeing reflected in the administrative reports and many of our other styles of correspondence, right? The goal of culture and communication, educational excellence, and school experience. Those have been the 3 goals and focus areas as a result of our strategic plan over the last couple of years. What our administrative team has really attempted to identify by building or by department, if you will, are using those 3 tenets, those 3 goal areas. Some various highlights. Again, each of those goal areas had sub-goals, focus areas. So you would see some of the highlighted areas in an attempt to, oftentimes when we have a strategic plan, it becomes a lot of checklist items. We did this, check mark, and then we put it back on the shelf and we don't revisit it again. So what we are hoping to do by bringing it back and forth, we have made it a normal part of our administrative admin council meetings. Every time we have a council meeting, we review our calendar of events, activities, where are we making progress. We often might share out various pieces within the departments or administrators as kind of a self-check and an accountability piece with everybody to make sure that we are keeping our big focus points and not getting stuck on some of the day-to-day pieces that oftentimes can kind of consume our work, reminding ourselves to stay big picture. So you'll see some of the various highlights, some of the different goals within each of the 3 buildings. Some of our departments, special education, which received a big component of our strategic plan, and curriculum and instruction, of course, one of the tenets, one of the goals, educational excellence, certainly falls into that category. So some of these things, again, really do lend themselves more to checklist items, process procedures, cleaning some things up, making sure we We have things in line with our vision and mission. And then kind of continuing on with some of those things. And then the last, again, this is a 5-year strategic plan. This is year 2. It's supposed to be a fluid document, so we're looking at, geez, this was a goal that we were hoping to hit through year 2. Did we achieve that goal? Did we meet some of that work? Is it embedded in our culture? Or is it something that we've just checked off? And then our normal process as we get through the spring would be kind of a end of the year wrap up with this, moving things out of year 2 that maybe we didn't get to or didn't become rise to that level at that time, and maybe shifting them into year 3 to be reflective of that whole strategic plan process where it falls in there. Again, just like Danielle talked about, we're really looking more at a long-term plan, less reactionary on the day-to-day, more whole picture, long range. Instead of the big ebbs and flows, ups and downs throughout the school year, a steady stream of progress, whatever metric you would use to maybe guide that, but looking more for consistent approaches and less of that, oh shoot, we forgot about this. Let's focus all of our energy into that right now and shifting everything else aside. So it's pretty comprehensive, as you've seen throughout the time. I like those 3. I think those 3 areas, culture and communication, academic excellence, school experiences, really encompasses a lot of the work that we're looking to do, matches our goal and vision, and then using that as a grounding point certainly with our administrative team, and then filtering that down from our administrative team through their building faculty meetings or leadership team meetings. How does that look at the granular level? What might that look like? And again, by using a more purposeful approach, trying to embed some of this stuff into our culture. For instance, one of the things that we've really spent a lot of time this year, culture-wise, is more of a culture around the use of data with our teachers, with our instructional coaches, in our meetings, using that data. So not just saying, hey, here's a print off of our achievement data, but what does that achievement data tell us? How are we using it to inform our instruction, inform those budgetary decisions around our programs? Do we need to make changes and recommendations around? Are we getting the ends that we're looking for because of that work? So, in making it more culture-based so that it's not one person driving that information or that work, and really building a culture around whatever that is. And I just use data as this example, but we could point to several other ones. So just wanted to give, kind of a brief overview of some of that work. It's important to us. It's on the tip of our tongue. It's on things that we talk about at our administrative meetings. We're continuing to do that work. It's not defined by start and end times. It's really cyclical until it becomes ingrained. So hopefully this provides some update on that. I don't know if the board has any questions related to it.
Is this typically the format we would see this in?
We hadn't done one of these before, so we talked administratively about what might the most appropriate format be. And because some of this work really, each building or department is in such different places with certain things that their individual priorities, even under the umbrella of educational excellence, may look a little different, or how they might get to those goals might look different. We don't want to canned, one size fits all, drive it down everybody's throat in one model. So this gives some autonomy to the buildings and the departments to really customize the work of their building or their department while still functioning within a system that uses the same language and the same parameters.
I was gonna say, I do like this broken apart. I think it's I think it's helpful to
I just want
understand.
to make sure I understand the layout. Basically, it's saying, you know, obviously strategic plan is on these first couple of pages.
Yep.
And then it's saying elementary school, under the 3 target areas, these are some of the things that we did and implemented.
Yes, this
to-
first half of this year, that is correct.
I like this layout.
I'm just thinking too that this could be cumulative, even if it was for your own reference as a board member,
Yeah.
to go back and do some comparisons if you need information for later.
I think this report is fantastic, and I would love to see the administrative report. Like, I know the administrative reports are broken down maybe by the headers that are the same,
Yes.
but not every report is, so I would love to see like more examples in the administrative reports of each of these sections. But overall, I think it's fantastic.
I have to say that I love one thing that you said that really kind of resonated with me, and you said it throughout the time that you spoke, is that you're looking to take the items that are part of our plan and embed them into our culture, not just check them off the list that we accomplished them, because that is one thing we really are looking to grow and change. You know, is that culture, really develop a rich culture here. And so I really appreciated that.
Right. Yeah, a good example of that, right, is our Science Olympiad, right? We just saw that tonight. That's a culture piece for us. It's been here, it's embedded, the vision, the philosophy, the support behind it. Now applying that same type of model and methodology to those 3 focus areas.
This might be a really small thing. I don't know if it strikes anyone else. I would say this Science Olympiad, Danielle's report. The pictures are great. I mean, it just helps remind you why we're here, and instead of just looking at the numbers. So kudos to you guys, because it really kind of helps bring you back.
The only other thought I had as I was looking at this, and this is probably me forgetting, is did we at one point go through and say, of each of these are the ones that are gonna be our focus area for the first year or the 2 years or something?
So we have a,
Or
as-
who, not we, but
before,
whoever,
yeah.
like,
Yep, as
I didn't
part of the
remember
strategic
which-
plan process, as that strategic plan is being developed and designed, part of that, including with some of our community, whether it was faculty and staff or community at large, looked at prioritizing some of those things, like what were our biggest needs that we should hit in year 1, what was something that might be scaffolded down to year 2, and trying to balance all of that work. That's the challenge, is when you look at this comprehensive document and you see all of these types of things that might, it's hard to say, well, this is more or less important than the next, but trying to be aware and balance that work so that every year there's purpose behind it, and it's not just everything on year 1 and then you're juggling all those balls in year 2 and year 3 and year 4. So it gives us, again, that chance to review in year 2, hey, we said in year 1 we did this, is that now part of our culture? Did we drop it off and we need to come back to it? So over that 5 years, it's kind of scaffolded in.
was there a document or something that was provided to the board that said, this is kind of what we're looking at, of what the layout of would be, let's say the top priorities for year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Is that something that was provided?
There was options, and then there was what they broke it down to, these outside groups. It didn't involve the board, though. It was
Right.
just-
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't know if it was, because as I'm looking at this, you know, I see the different items that are being reached, and then I, you know, see what we're gonna work on.
I might still have it, Jolene.
Remaining, I didn't know if it was something that might be able to be included as like a back page reminder
Yeah.
with this report. You know, when it comes, you just say, you know, this was our target path.
Sure. Yep.
And then if I'm looking and going, okay, goal 1B, that's something they're working on. Oh, wait, I didn't think we were gonna work on that till year 5.
Sure.
Not that I'm saying that we can't, I just, my brain kind of functions that way.
Right,
That's okay, it actually,
right? That's got the 1 to 2 breakdown. In
That
terms of
was,
that Fuller report.
that was since, the original one was like thick.
I've
But
received
the-
so many reports
Right.
at this point.
The original one,
File
right.
this big.
So what Ms. Folds just just showed, which is something that we talked about much earlier in the school year, was kind of a condensed version. It was like, it started as a 60-page document, which is not super user-friendly. So trying to condense down to what Ms. Folds had, and then, again, just kind of condensed down, again, mid-year kind of thing, but, you know, end of the year. We have those documents, then we can get those, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, the next item on the agenda, the code of conduct discussion, we're gonna table that for a later date. Excuse me. And then if there isn't anything else, I would take a motion to move into exec for particular personnel and negotiations. Mrs. Allen and Mrs. Kaiser. Thank you very much.
Kids are getting out so early, you're so
I know, the people that came in the beginning of the year, so.